For anyone worried about spoilers, I've ensured to only cover content from Act 2 and everything that comes before it. Act 2 of Hollow Knight Silksong takes place within the upper reaches of Pharloom. Here Hornet faces a new set of story-distinct bosses, each playing their own role from Team Sherry's massive world. So without further delay, here's all of Silksong's Act 2 boss lore explained in under 1 minute. Trobbio is a performer who believes only grand spectacles can revive Pharloom. Though his intentions may have once been good at heart, they soon changed as he now willingly sacrifices others upon his stage. To achieve his goal, Trobbio chooses to engage others in combat as a means of creating a performance that would, as he chooses to explain it, spark Pharloom's flame ablaze. Thus, he invites his so-called stage partners to be bedazzled by fireworks and smoke bombs. True to his dramatic nature, Trobbio even fakes his own death, to the point that when Hornet tries to leave, Trobbio, ashamed of his failure, attempts to slip away. He basically sees himself as Pharloom's glorified savior, which is at least I think the reason why he chooses to shout at his own name. The Cogwork Dancers are intricate constructs built to guard Pharloom's peak. In a desperate attempt to protect their kingdom, the Green Prince's partners sacrificed his body to serve as the mold for their design. Yet this sacrifice was betrayed when the Citadel broke its promise and brought about Verdania's destruction, leaving the Green Prince as both its last ruler and final survivor. With his hope now gone, the Green Prince chose to rot in solitude. However, that quickly changes when he's finally freed from his cage, where the wish to release his partner's soul once again compels him. Since the Citadel was only given one soul, they forcibly split the Green Prince's partner in two. Though having only half control each construct restricted their power, which is why stations to help rewind their gears were designed alongside them. Disgraced chef Lugoli once lived in the Citadel but was exiled for his repeated culinary crimes. Forced to return to his old home, he now hoards his disgusting dishes above his kitchen. Even before the haunting consumed their minds, Lugoli and his assistants carved their portions into crude manglings of meat. Lugoli believed that this method of cooking better captured Pharloom's flavor. However, his crimes actually stemmed from his horrifying choice of ingredients, Pharloom's very own bugs. Some of his pickling jars even hold what appear to be unlucky pilgrims, thus making it likely that during his time in the Citadel, he used its very servants as ingredients for his meals. Groal the Great is the chief of the Stoken, a tribe in Biowater that deeply resents the Citadel for polluting their lands. Though eager to consume everything in sight, Groal's throat can't handle spiked objects or explosives. Despite this, Groal has learned to channel absorbed souls through his mouth and release vengeful spirits upon his opponents. This ability was once stolen by him, as we actually discovered the corpse of a snail shaman in the same hut he chose to store his gathered soul. Those vials end up reminding Hornet of Helena's soul sanctum, which is why she remarks that Groal isn't the first to attempt to mold soul towards such violent ends. Signis and Gron were once elder overseers of the Deep Docks, entrusted with maintaining order and driving the endless excavation of Pharloom's caves. Despite being driven into madness by the haunting, they still hold themselves responsible for the oversight of lesser workers. To keep operations running smoothly, the brothers divided their roles, which is why at first Hornet only encounters Signis. Using his long staff, Signis is able to strike his opponents from a distance, and even throw it as a sort of boomerang. After he calls for assistance, Gron, relying on a spear and a set of explosive dice, begins to fight alongside him. As Signis can control the structures of the Deep Docks and summon other workers to his side, he seemingly established himself as the dominant figure between the two. Garmond is a seasoned knight who travels through Pharloom with his loyal companion Zaza. Together they exist as the last known survivors of a village devastated by the haunting. Driven by vengeance for their fallen allies, they seek out the Citadel's rulers, while also hoping to protect other settlements from a similar fate. As arguably the real brain behind their attacks, Zaza serves as both a mount and strategist that helps guide Garmond's attacks. Using his horn lance, Garmond is then able to leap into the air and stab downwards at his foes. The Unravelled is a grotesque mask of silk-bound husks born from the Citadel's cruel experiments. The surgeons of Whiteward once tried to use Pharloom silk to unnaturally extend life, forcing bugs into endless servitude. When their experiments failed, the broken bodies were discarded into a pit, but with those corpses, traces of living silk still remained. This eventually caused the large quantities of it to begin reanimating these empty shells. One of these bodies ended up becoming its host, Conductor Mazzello. His final surgery now only remains accounted for in one of the Psalm cylinders found near the bottom of the pit. Since we're on the topic of boss fights, here's a fun challenge. As we go through each boss, rank them by difficulty. Then by the end of the video, share your full list in the comments so that we can find out which one was the most difficult. If you'd also like to support the growth of my channel, I would really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like and subscribing. The second Sentinel is a Cogwork Knight bound to what it refers to as the highest holy duty. As one of 5 Sentinels created by the architects, this Clockwork Guardian's role is to bring bugs safely or when necessary by force into the Citadel. Wielding a scissor-like blade, the second Sentinel can charge attacks similar to the needle strike taught by the Pinstress. Her now forgotten order had once aided the Citadel's growth through their training, but these teachings were later turned against them, leaving only the Seamstress and Pinstress as their last survivors. Powered by a cog heart, the second Sentinel runs on both gears and soak-like energy. Yet unlike most machines in Pharloom, this construct seems capable of independent thought, enough for Hornet to describe it as less a tool for service and more an attempt at life itself. The Voltvyrm is a coiled nest of electrified worms that dwells within the ceiling barnacles of Voltnest. Barely conscious, it relies on instinct alone to detect and ambush intruders with crackling bolts of electricity. Its energy comes from a specialized organ known as the Volt Filament, a source of energy so strong that it gave rise to nearby mineral deposits full of Voltvyrm. Judging by the environment, it seems that an even larger colony of related worms inhabit these walls as well. These smaller worms can discharge their own electricity and persist even after Hornet defeats the Voltvyrm, implying that they're independent organisms rather than extensions of the Voltvyrm's main nest. The Father of the Flame is a totemic deity built and revered by the burning bugs of the Wisp Thicket. As a sign of devotion, they carry lanterns that release fiery wisp-like spirits. While these spirits do show signs of basic thought, their short-lived lives make their exact consciousness unclear. The burning bugs have seemingly scattered these lanterns all throughout the Wisp Thicket, and even affixed them to the Father of the Flame as a way of sustaining their deity. Hornet actually notes that within the largest of these flames lies the remains of an aged bug, which could possibly be this god's original form. However, given that the burning bugs themselves seek immolation and all do so upon their father's defeat, this bug may have simply been another follower who achieved their final goal. Shakra is a skilled warrior from a distant tribe on the edges of Pharloom. Also considering herself a navigator, she maps out these lands in search of her missing mentor, whom she calls the greatest of her tribe. Despite eventually discovering that her master has passed, Shakra chooses to remain in Pharloom, recognizing that the home she once regarded as grand now feels small compared to the vast land she has traversed. Though Hornet appears young in her eyes, Shakra recognizes her as a fellow warrior, which is why she later requests a duel as a way of helping improve her own skill and eventually reach the level of her master's prime. The Broodmother is a mad matriarch and the source of all of the jailers within this lab. The flies born from her eggs are responsible for capturing and punishing the Citadel's sinners, some of whom, seeking forgiveness, have come to this prison of their own accord. Before reaching maturity, the flies must live past their initial blindness, and what I like to call their pre-developed organ failures. This stage of development is arguably the easiest, however, as mature workers live only brief lives due to their overwhelmingly poor sanitation or risk of starvation. When the Broodmother eventually falls, a broodling is left in its place. Since the other workers feed and tend to this juvenile broodmother, the wish for it to grow and lay more eggs implies the species lives within a nest-like hierarchy, where one fly serves as the central mother to the rest. The first sinner is an ancient weaver and the first to defy Grandmother Soak. Gifted with the ability to control Soak, she can weave blazing runes that explode after a set period of time. Hornet actually recognized them from her lifetime and even suggested the first sinner may have been the first to master this skill. Upon discovering that the weaver's true origin was not as Grandmother Soak's children, but as uplifted Farlids, the first sinner was imprisoned within this lab. But this confinement didn't prevent the other weavers from eventually still lulling Grandmother Soak into a deep slumber. Knowing that this cage wouldn't hold forever, many of the weavers chose to flee Pharloom and seek out other species in the hopes that they could create offsprings free from Grandmother Soak's control. Grandmother Soak is the ancient monarch of Pharloom and the primal source of Soak. With her thread, she displaced the many kingdoms and tribes that had once ruled these lands. To sustain her power, she created the weavers and granted them the ability to eternally uphold her through song. When they eventually betrayed her, Grandmother Soak was forced to use her own Soak to craft 2 children, hoping they could awaken her from her slumber. Since she knew her Soak wouldn't last forever, she used the bugs controlled by the Haunting to seek out any remaining weavers. This search ultimately led to the discovery of Hornet, who, though only part weaver, could wield her own Soak and thus help Grandmother Soak awaken once again. Since I don't want to spoil Act 3, I've decided to end the video here. If you've been keeping track on which bosses were the most difficult, be sure to leave your list in the comments. And if you've noticed any other lore details that I may have missed, feel free to share them as well. Thanks for watching.